Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now it's been a while since we've gone back to Necromunda, and with the recent release of Necromunda Underhive Wars on PC, I really got a taste for the look of the old Necromunda gangers. The Goliath are one of those gangs which are just fun. You know, they're big, chunky miniatures, but it can be a little off-putting because it can seem like there's so much happening there. So I wanted to try and tackle the easiest way I could think of to get Goliath painted and on the table. There's fairly few colors for this as well, so you know, if you're operating on a budget, here's a great way to get your stuff done really easily. And I had a lot of fun with this. So all of the paints will be listed in the description below. No further mucking around, let's get started. So to begin with, I've given him a primer spray of leather brown from the Army Painter. Now, a common question is whether or not you need to use another primer underneath, like a grey or a white or something. Short answer, no. They are colour primers, and the same is true of the Citadel colour sprays as well. Now, when it comes to a miniature like this, you'll see there's quite a lot happening on them. You know, there's a lot of detail on these these new Necromunda figures. So it plays to go in with a bit of a game plan. So I'm going to go in as if we're getting this guy dressed. We're going to start with the lowest areas, so his skin, and we're going to layer all the colours over the top until we reach the highest points in the form of his armour, his weapon, and so forth. So we'll start with Bugman's Glow. Now, I've probably got a bit much on my brush there. There we go. What we'll do is just go around and cover in all of his skin. I'm using a regiment's brush here from the Army Painter. Reason being, my poor medium layer brush has seen better days. You'll see I'm trying to avoid like the metalwork and his armor and what have you. But don't worry too much if you do hit them, because we are going to paint them over later. But when it comes to, you know, oh, I need to be deadly careful as I get to some of these areas, don't worry about it. All you want to do is make sure that you're getting a nice solid coat. So you'll see we are getting some of the primer still showing through. So when this dries, I'm going to come back around and give him a second coat of Bugman's Glow. Now areas here, like in the back of his arm, kind of tucked away in there, it's a little difficult to show off. But you'll see that part of his arm is showing through. You know, I am going to get some paint on the straps there, but like I said, we're not worried. Now we've got a nice solid skin tone, just 2 coats of Bugman's Glow in some areas. And you'll see in a couple of little spots, you know, like on his armor at the front here, you know, oh no, I've got a little bit on the armor, but I'm not too worried. Just take your time. All that matters is that skin. Now, what do you do next when you get dressed? You generally put your underwear on, but this fella, you know, we can't see. That's probably not a line of reasoning we need to go down. But instead of his undies, we're going to paint his trousers. And for that, I've got here Corvus Black. This is, in reality, a very dark grey. And you could use straight Abaddon Black for his trousers here, but I'm going to use Corvus Black because I want just a little bit of, a little bit of shading when we do hit him with that Agrax later. So I've given my paint a really good shake and then added just a little bit of water to it to make sure it's going to flow properly. Bit of a cheat when it comes to adding water is just to keep an eye on how the paint sits on your palette. If you have any sort of brush strokes, peaks or what have you that form when you run your brush through it and they stay standing, you probably need to add just a little bit more water. I don't necessarily hold with folks that say you need to have a milky consistency with your paint. You're going to be painting forever if you do it that way. But you do want sort of peaks. Think of it like baking. You know, when they say beat until stiff peaks form, when you're doing eggs and stuff like that, that's the point where you'd want to stop with your paints. That's not making a great deal of sense, is it? Never mind. This is probably going to take 2 coats, because same as with the skin, you'll see in some areas we are getting a little bit of that primer show through. But let's come back, get a look at this once he's had his second coat applied. Now after that second coat, we've got a nice solid black for the trousers. Now we're going to move on and paint leather straps, and for this I'm going to use Mournfang Brown. Now I do want quite a warm sort of tone overall, so I'm going with this sort of mid-tone brown. But if you want your guys to look darker, then by all means use a darker brown here. The reason why I'm doing this before painting any of the metallics is, as you'll see, there's lots of these little buckles and what have you on the dude. And luckily there's not actually a huge amount of leather on these guys. So take your time. You'll probably find in some areas you can get away with doing just one coat of this. As boots are probably a pretty good spot for this. I'll do this metal later. Wherever you want leather now, paint in whichever leather colour you've chosen. Now how much leather there is to paint will depend of course on the miniature in question. So I've done the straps on the back of his boots, the actual boots themselves, and just a couple of leather straps around the miniature. What we're going to want to do now is all of the metal work, and I'm going to use two different colours for this. I've got here Lead Belcher and Iron Warriors lurking in the background there. Now because there's not a lot of uniformity, this is really where you get to pick how you'd like your models to look. So I'm going to give him Lead Belcher in a few areas, and then I'll just do some Iron Warriors in others for darker metal. At the same time, I'm going to go ahead and give the whole base a quick once over with some Lead Belcher. This is really up to you. This thing on the back here, I'm going to do a bright metal. And yeah, just either have a look at the, the reference photos on the stores. Just pick areas that you think are going to look cool and paint them metal. There's not really a right answer here. Now I've just chosen areas at random to hit with those two colours. You'll see in particular the Lead Belcher and Iron Warriors together. Iron Warriors almost has a sort of blue-black look to it. It's really nice. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick some Mephiston Red, although there isn't really a correct colour to this. If you wanted to change this up to your own ends, here would be where you could use pretty much anything. Maybe Baraknar Burgundy or Corn Red if you want a darker finish. There is not a correct answer here. But all we'll do is go around, and all of these red panels that I want to see now, let's paint them red. Now we're starting to come together. What I've got here now is some Corax white, and what I'm actually going to do is paint in his hair. Reason being, I think this is going to be the quickest way to do it. I'll paint this white, and then later on we'll apply a contrast colour to this, once I've decided what colour I want to do his hair. Corax white can be a bit of a tricky one. It will seem very glunky, so I do recommend get an agitator in there. Go ahead and add a little bit of medium to it as well, some Lamian medium. And make sure you really shake the dickens out of it before you use it. Check out those Hollywood teeth. These guys are so much fun. What I've got now is some Balthazar Gold, and I'm not going to do very much of this, to be perfectly honest. I would suggest that for your Juves and your Gangers, you want to be really sparing with this. Maybe for your champions you can pick out a few more details. I mean, you'll see the Goliath, they've got so many sort of trims and things on their armor that you can go to town with this. What I'm going to do with this, though, is to pick out some sort of mechanical areas that just could do with a little bit more visual interest. So this stim injector thing on his back here is a good candidate for this. And like I said, be sparing. I don't think there's many places I am going to apply this. Now, like I said, I didn't do much there. And you can also use it to add a little bit to the base at this stage. I'm not really very good with these Mechanicus sector bases. What we're going to do now is actually varnish this miniature. I'm going to use Munitorum varnish, though a gloss varnish would also work very well. You could just brush that on. I'm going to quickly spray them, because what that's going to do is change how our shade reacts to the surface of the miniature. It's going to flow away from high points much more readily, which is, perfect for what we want to do. So he's going to look real shiny in a couple of seconds, but that is what we want. Now you really want to make sure that your varnish is set properly before we start applying anything to it. So I've given that about 10 minutes, and there we go. Isn't that something? So I've got here my Agrax Earthshade and a big old brush. And I've made sure to give this a really good shake before starting to use it because, same as acrylic paint, it needs to be mixed up. So let's apply this generously over the whole model. Same too with his hair. We are going to contrast that with something in a bit, but for now, just over everything. And you'll see that with that varnish, this kind of runs off of those high points much more readily. We also want to shade his base, but we'll go down and finish that off as we go naturally. Now, after about 30 minutes drying time, this is what we've got. And quite frankly, why don't we just base him up, put the black around the rim there and put him on the table. He's not looking too bad at all. In particular, because we've used a shade which has no gloss component, we've actually dulled down a lot of the shine from the varnish underneath, and that looks pretty okay to me. I would say if you want to just call and finish there, why not? But I did want to do something with his hair, so I've got here some, this is warp lightning, and all we're going to do is get this straight out of the pot, and we're going to apply this to his hair, making sure that we get it into the recesses. Then we'll give that a couple of minutes to dry. Now let's grab ourselves a slightly smaller brush and a little bit of Cadian flesh tone. And what we'll do is just pick out a couple of areas we want that skin to pop just a little bit more. So his nose, his brows. Take your time with this, and I'd say you want to be a little sparing with it. Now, highlighting big old chunks of muscle like the Goliaths are, it's kind of a style choice, I'd say. So have a look around online if there's any that you really like the look of. But let's finish that off. Get a look how I'm going to do it. Now, if you end up with some highlights that are a little thick or just in places that you don't want them, rather than going back to Bugman's Glow and then trying to shade it, what you can use is Night Quest or Flesh. Because if I flick this guy up here, and let's just touch in, there we go, fix that up a little bit, you'll see Night Quest or Flesh is basically Bugman's Glow with a shade. So it's a nice quick cleanup colour if you need it. Now once you're satisfied with how the skin's looking, the last stage that I'm going to do is to get a little bit of Necron compound and one of my little makeup brushes that I use to dry brush with. And we'll just lightly flick along some of the areas of the base just to brighten those up a bit. And we'll do a little, just lightly against the edges of his gun. I'm not terribly concerned about things like his armor or, these wristband things he's got going. Just want to brighten up some of the metalwork a little bit. Now to finish him off, what I'm going to do is to edge in the ring of his base in black. And then once that's dried, I'm just going to hit him with a matte varnish from a can. And for that, I'm going to use Vallejo's matte varnish spray. It's really very good. And then we'll get a look at what it looks like once he's all finished. And there at last, our Goliath Ganger is complete. Now I know I always sound a little surprised when I finish these things, but I actually really enjoyed painting them. I have genuinely put this off for months because I was really worried that painting this Goliath was going to be way more difficult than it turned out to be. So even if you are yourself, concerned about how hard something's going to be, well, hey, give it a shot. You might surprise yourself. Now from here you could do all sorts, in particular highlighting that red, adding a little bit more to his trousers if you wanted to, but we're really concentrating on just getting models on the table. And if we take out the drying time on this fella, you're looking at maybe half an hour to get him to this kind of standard. And to be honest, I don't think there's anything wrong in putting that on the table. So as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of the patrons who are helping me tick over in paint and glue, including producers Alan Nuttall, Ben Hicks, Kyrie Crawford, Trainboy, and Connor. Your guys' contributions are invaluable. So if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the old box below. My Twitter and Facebook are both linked there too. And as a quick aside, if you do want to chat, Twitter's probably the easiest place to get hold of me. So thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you will enjoy the rest of your day.